plea allocution, what Cohen says is he was directed by the candidate to pay the money. That doesn't implicate the crime here is not paying the money. The crime here is not making the required campaign finance disclosure. Now, I'm sure they could argue that it was implicit that there would be no disclosure because that's why you make the payment in the first place. But the important thing is there is a difference between a direction to make a payment and a direction not to file a required campaign disclosure. And I didn't hear anything that in what's been reported or what he said in his allocution that the president directed him to violate the campaign finance laws.
Well, that is this is why you're so good at what you do. I never would have picked that up myself, to be very blunt. And this is where a lot of nuances in this. The prosecutor, I don't know if you know him, the one that gave the press conference, his name escapes me at the moment, but I mean, he was very eloquent in explaining what this case was about, but he also talked about a pattern of dishonesty that has gone on for years and false reimbursement and so on and so forth and things that he filed and statements. And when I go to the issue of what Michael Cohen had said previously, is that an issue? Do you see this in any way as an issue for the president?
Well, I at the moment, I think the political ramifications of this are worse for the president than the legal ones because what happened here, if you're regarding someone as a cooperating witness, Sean, what you would usually do is throw the book at him. You wouldn't be talking about 3 to 5 years in prison. So what they've done here is they've treated this as a straight-up plea, not a cooperation agreement. They probably don't regard him as a potentially good cooperator because he's made so many statements all over the map that he's not the kind of guy you would want to put on the stand. So I think what he has said in court today is politically damaging for the president. There's no question about that. But as far as legally is concerned, I don't think they see this guy as someone they want to build a case on. And I think Mueller has already decided that he doesn't help on collusion with Russia, which is why the Southern District got the case in the first place.
Well, let me then ask this. I mean, if we're looking at this in its total, I thought this was all supposed to be about Russia and Trump and campaign and collusion with Russia to influence the campaign. And, I can go through, all the cases where Clinton charities had to refile their tax returns and because of errors or the fact, by the way, the president has arrived in West Virginia. He's speaking. We'll run that in a minute. But Al Sharpton didn't have a $4.5 million tax bill. He didn't pay. And Tim Geithner, remember the tax cheat Tim Geithner? He regretted mistakes with taxes. But, okay, I understand the law is the law. And I have said this to everybody I know for years, pay your taxes. So if I look at Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort, these are the lessons that I get. Don't lie when making an application for a loan to a bank. Don't lie. Pay your taxes. And in the case of Flynn and Papadopoulos, don't lie to the FBI. And if we're going to add the one other issue we're talking about, count 7 and 8 with Michael Cohen, don't make contributions that to a campaign and then try and put it off through false reimbursements to silence a woman, et cetera, what the prosecutor in the case said. If I sum it up, did I sum it up pretty well?
Yeah, Sean, the only thing I would add to that is the issue I think that we're going to have to look at hard and discuss over the next days and weeks is whether there's been a change in the way they enforce the campaign finance laws. So in 2008, to take this example, the Obama administration commits over $2 million worth of campaign finance violations and is permitted by the Eric Holder-led Obama Justice Department to settle that with a fine to the SEC. I think it was a $300,000 fine or so, if I'm remembering right. So, in other words, that was a major violation that was not handled as a felony. And now, suddenly it looks like we're changing course and treating this as a felony. I'm not trying to excuse unlawful behavior, but I do think that it's important to look into whether the government is handling these matters consistently or not.
Well, I think a lot of that goes to one of the arguments I have been making. I mean, you know my arguments as well as anybody, and I believe that you don't write an exoneration before you interview 17 key people. In the case of Hillary, I don't think I've ever seen a bigger case, clear-cut case of obstruction than what she did with with subpoenaed emails and her hard drive with bleach bit and busting up devices with hammers and removing SIM cards. And I do believe what happened to the FISA court on 4 separate applications was a fraud and lies to a judge. I would add that to the list. Don't do that stuff either. I don't think you'd recommend me doing it if you were my attorney.
No.
And she's gotten away with it. And then we've got, the issues involving the Espionage Act. And then we've got all these fired FBI and DOJ people. I mean, 25 people have either been fired, demoted, or resigned, the top people. I mean, from Comey to McCabe to Strzok to Page and Sally Yates and Bruce Orr and everybody in between. I mean, it seems like we don't have any movement about everyone. I don't see any indictments about lying to FISA court judges. Isn't that bad?
No, not at the moment. Now, we understand that there's 2 different investigations of this going on at the Justice Department. We'll have to see how that turns out. But I think there's a profound case that there has been or have been 2 different standards of justice, depending on who it is who's violating the laws. I'm not casting aspersions at my old office. I think very highly of the people there. Jeff Berman, who I think is the U.S. attorney that you were referring to earlier, is President Trump's appointee there.
No, he was recused from this.
Oh, okay. Was it Rob Khuzami then? But it was somebody.
Yes, it was Khuzami, yes.
Yeah, Rob Khuzami was my partner, or one of my partners on the Blind Shade case.
Seems very smart, very efficient. He gave a, totally professional press conference. Let me play for you, Andy, if I might. This is the president arriving in West Virginia, reacting to both cases.
Very sad about that. It doesn't involve me, but I still feel, it's a very sad thing that happened. This has nothing to do with Russian collusion. This started as Russian collusion. This has absolutely nothing to do. This is a witch hunt and it's a disgrace. This has nothing to do what they started out looking for Russians involved in our campaign. There were none. I feel very badly for Paul Manafort. Again, he worked for Bob Dole. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for many, many people. And this is the way it ends up. And it was not the original mission, believe me. It was something very much different. So, had nothing to do with Russian collusion. We continue the witch hunt. Thank you very much.
That was the president's full statement. Now, Andy, I want to just ask you. I mean, it is true. How do you go from Russia collusion, and the charges are Flynn and Papadopoulos lying to the FBI? You have tax and bank fraud in the case of both Manafort and Cohen, and 2 campaign finance violations. How do we get there?
Yeah, well, Sean, I think that this goes to what we discussed last night with Professor Dershowitz on your show, which is these guys have been in the crosshairs of prosecutors had they not been connected to the Trump campaign. It's hard to believe that they would have. It's a standard practice by prosecutors who think that somebody has the evidence that they need to advance an investigation, that you squeeze that person to try to get cooperation.
You and I might have a slight disagreement on this, but I understand the process. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is if let's say Mueller actually takes his mandate seriously and views it that what he needs to do is get to the bottom and answer all the questions about Russia's interference in the election. Forget about President Trump for a second. Manafort is a guy who has long-standing connections to Kremlin-connected people. It may well be that the reason that the squeeze is being put on Manafort is Mueller regards him as important in terms of what Russia's intentions are, not necessarily on the president.
Well, that goes to Judge Ellis, who says they're going to put the screws to Manafort, make him sing or compose for the purpose of prosecuting or impeaching Trump. Okay, well, so far, Manafort, who, by the way, I talked to him after all this started, and he said to me, I don't have anything to say. Those were his exact words to me.
Sean, I'm going to make the same point that I've made before. Manafort was not in Trump world for a long time. It's not like he's a long-standing confidant of the president, right? He worked for him for a certain period, a short period of time during the campaign. And for 6 months, maybe it's 7 months now, Mueller has had access to Rick Gates, who is Manafort's longtime partner. And I have to think anything that Manafort would have known about Russian collusion, Gates would have known. And yet, since Gates...
He got a get-out-of-jail-free card. Yeah.
Yeah, but what has happened to Mueller's investigation since then? He's returned 2 indictments against Russians that don't have a hint of any complicity by the Trump campaign, and they're quietly farming these cases out. So I think, I think that this is really, at this point, it's all about obstruction. I don't think that Mueller sees a collusion case here. I just don't.
Well, an obstruction, I mean, it's just like after Papadopoulos and Flynn, why would anybody ever talk to Mueller or any FBI guy? I'm a guy, my mom was a prison guard. My dad was a family court probation guy. And two members of my extended family made the FBI. They were deity. The rest were New York City cops, and they were deity to me. But,
right.
And then when, you watch a case like this, I have FBI guys saying, don't ever talk to the FBI. I'm like, what do you mean don't talk to them? My inclination is, of course I talk to them.
Yeah, but Sean, people in these positions don't talk to the FBI and the prosecutors because they want to. They talk to them because they think it's the least bad alternative they have.
Well, but I mean, if you're going to get, like, for example, if Don McGahn spends 30 hours with Mueller, and let's say Trump does go in and talk to him, which would be a bad idea, but if he did, what if he contradicts 1, 2, or 3 things? And then isn't it the prosecutor that decides, well, we don't believe Trump, we hate Trump?
Yeah, well, that's additional reason why Trump shouldn't go in there. Yeah. I must tell you, Sean, in 20 years as a prosecutor, I never got to interview the main subject of any investigation's lawyer, let alone interview him for 30
Crazy, right?
hours. Well, but it goes to show that he doesn't need President Trump in order to finish his work.
It's a great point. Let me go back to the case you mentioned. In 2008, Obama's election campaign didn't properly report $2 million in last-minute donations to the juggernaut, and I'm reading from Reuters, that swept him into the White House. But that was the only violation found in the FEC's audit of Obama's $778 million campaign. All right, $2 million. In the case of Cohen, we're talking about, and by the way, they paid a fine. It was a record at the time, some 300 and, what did I have here? I had it in front of me, 300 and some odd $1,000. Right, $375,000, the biggest fine at the time, one of the top 5. In the case of Cohen, isn't that just less than 300,000, not $2 million? Does that equal justice?
Yeah, well, that's, who's the other one who comes up here, Sean? Dinesh D'Souza, who I think his campaign violation was like $15,000, and they charged him with felony. I mean, that's why people look at this stuff and they say, do we really have one standard of justice in this country?
Well, I think on all the other issues that we have pointed out, nothing has happened, and that this was supposed to be about Russia in the beginning, and this is what we end up with lying to the FBI. By the way, don't lie to the FBI. Pay your taxes and don't lie on loan applications. There are lessons here, but it has nothing to do with Russia or the campaign of 2016. Andy, I love having smart people on the show. You're one of them. You're going to join us on TV tonight.